recognizing that Travis was very different to Marie. Marie was very detail oriented. Travis in this sort of training wasn't so detail oriented, and I'm training them both at the same time. And so COVID was even more interesting because all of a sudden I didn't have my technology available to me. Very interesting how many toys had to leave the room.
So you had to adapt.
I had to adapt massively, and to train them both together more, and getting Travis to really buy into the warm-up, the mobility.
Greetings, everyone. This is Eric Henry Anderson, and welcome to another episode of Conversations for Convergence, a curious podcast exploring myriad topics, including music and the arts, health and wellness, culture, science, high performance, and many others. Today's guest is Nick Ward. Nick is a performance coach who has worked with athletes across a wide range of ages, talents, and needs, from amateur to professional and Olympic levels, and in various sports, including soccer, cricket, rugby, golf, skiing, and plenty of others. Nick's purpose is to support the health and performance of people who engage in and push themselves in athletic endeavors. He earned his bachelor's degree in sports science at the University of Northumbria and his master's in exercise physiology and functional fitness at the University of Calgary, Canada. After moving to South Lake Tahoe, California in 2016, Nick served as the ALTIS Director for Performance at Barton, where he also worked with the U.S. ski and snowboard teams. The program he helped build served over 400 locals, preparing them for mountain activities or returning them to the mountain post-injury. Nick also serves as the ALTIS Program's Director, where he coordinates the ALTIS membership program to develop coaches from all over the world. He also provides online and in-person coaching programs privately for high-performing athletes both locally and internationally. In this episode, we talk about how Nick got into coaching, athletes and people as complex systems, whether or not to incorporate weight training into programs for junior athletes, approaching coaching and sport through a creative and specialized lens, handling the foundational elements before the minutia, cultivating character, not just high performance, training World Cup skiers and Olympians Travis Ganong and Marie-Michelle Gagnon, injury risk mitigation, building community through training, distance and virtual coaching, Nick's inspirations, and many other topics. And I had the pleasure of getting to know Nick over the past few years through hiring him as my conditioning coach for my recent experimental adult ski racing comeback. As you'll see, Nick is a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and an excellent guy all around, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Nick Ward, how are you doing?
Hey, Eric. I'm enjoying a good cup of tea right now.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. Nice to hang out this morning.
Yeah.
So thanks for doing this. I figured a good place to start was what drew you to coaching?
Even as a young boy, I had a real fascination with learning. How does someone get good at something? Mm-hmm. And then kind of through experiences of, watching teachers, watching other coaches, and really teaching myself how to be a goalkeeper growing up as well. Just how you get better at something. Mm-hmm. And then realizing that you can have a role in that with other people, that you can recognize someone else's potential, either that they've seen for themselves or they don't know they've got that potential, and you can be that catalyst or that stimulus that, helps them get there. Yeah. It just fascinated me with how people get good at what they do and how other people can be involved in that.
Sure. Yeah, I think we've had this discussion before, but I kind of liken it to a producer in the music industry, mm-hmm. where it's somebody who takes an artist or a band, and their job is to sort of facilitate the environment and have that ability to see things about the musician that maybe they can't see about themselves, but really just kind of set up an environment for them to succeed. And I know from working with you too, mm-hmm. like that it's anyway, anytime you're talking about this, it always kind of reminds me of that musical analog too.
Yeah, environment is really important, right? I mean, so many people kind of get a step on sometimes because of the environment that they're brought up in or they're around. It can provide advantages. Sometimes it provides disadvantages that people, can work with and make themselves better out of that too. So I tend to think of myself as a little bit of an environmentalist coach or a generalist coach in the sense that I always try to, although I have specialist skills myself in physical preparation and, and nutrition and things as well, mm-hmm. Helping people develop and grow, in athletic sports and their endeavors, there is a lot more to it than are you just good at the sport?
Sure. Yeah. So would you say that's something that sort of sets you apart from other coaches, or something that's unique about your style? Is that sort of generalist, all-encompassing approach?
It's one which we educate people on and work people with with ALTIS, who I also work for, and it's a kind of a state of mind or thinking that I try not to only look at things through my own lens. And does it set me apart? Hate saying it, but in many ways, yes, it does, because I do look at the bigger picture. I try to work with the young people that I work with, their families, their parents, other staff, and always ask this question: what else is going on maybe somewhere else in this picture? And recognize that, I might not be the critical factor in this, and there's other things that might be delaying the adaptation, stopping the change, and the big circle of life, the athlete in or the person in the center of that, and everything else that's going on. They all act as a system, a system where there is a unified purpose. All the elements of that system are interconnected. So the analogy you could give is like, let's take the human body. You have the heart. The heart, what's its function? That was a question to you, Eric.
Oh, it is.
Just checking on your...
to move blood around the body, right?
But what is then that its overall purpose?
Keep you alive, to keep...
keep you moving, keep you alive. So we know we can take the heart out of the body. It can still be a heart. We can just attach it to a machine. It can still pump blood. But it no longer has a purpose, right? It's not connected to the overall goal.
It's existing in isolation.
Yeah, so definitely interconnectedness, and looking at lifestyle things, training well, eating well, how they rest, recover. Outside of just the technical side, there's a lot of skills. Cultural things, beliefs, behaviors, all those things I think can have a big impact on how well someone learns.
Yeah. So as you were sort of developing this curiosity, was through your own engagement, participation in sports, I imagine?
Yep.
And what were your sports?
So mainly growing up, I was a cross-country runner, and I was a goalkeeper in football, soccer, to now my new adopted homeland. And, I got very sick when I was 15, really lost all my kind of power, abilities, and you're left wondering why. And who's going to help me get back? And I was, as a 15-year-old, I was playing a very high standard of soccer. And I was wrecked after this illness called mono. And I had some people giving me bad advice, some people offering no advice, mainly on the whole, and no real clear pathway. It was, okay, how do I get back to this? I remember my very first game back, I ran out of breath in 10 minutes. Playing, and that's as a goalkeeper, and so you just start asking questions. How do I get better? What's
going on?
How do I get better? And really, there was very little help and advice and guidance for me as a young person. The only person that was really helpful was my PE teacher. Yet the professional club said, no, you can't do what he's telling you to do because you shouldn't lift weights as a kid. And this guy was trying to help me get stronger, Roger Stroud.
At 15, you're saying?
15, yeah. I was much bigger then than I am. I'm not bigger then than I am now, but I was tall for 15 as well. But, under the right guidance and stuff like that, I probably should have been lifting weights and getting stronger. And the best bit of advice I was given from someone was drink a Guinness a day.
At 15?
Yeah, that was actually the advice. You need to put weight back on, go and drink a Guinness a day. So, like I say, there's a lot of people who think they are able to give young people great advice about their athletic pursuits and development, but most of them don't know what the hell they're talking about, to be honest.
Right. I'm not sure what is more controversial, the advice of encouraging a 15-year-old to drink a Guinness or to lift weights. Serious question, but I'm actually curious what your perspective is on the weight training. I'm just going to go ahead and assume I know what your perspective is on the Guinness recommendation for 15-year-olds. But at least when I was growing up and in my teenage years, there was always this kind of resistance to lifting weights because of the growth plates not being closed. I mean, what do you think about that? Is there kind of an average age where athletes should start training, or is it something that they kind of gradually get into, or is it, in individual situation? How do you assess that, I guess?
it's a straw argument, right? Because let's pull the lens back. We're talking about a young human moving.
Okay.
And when they move, there's coordination of limbs and joints, messages coming from the nervous system, and they're going to move fast, they're going to move for a long time, and they're going to move dynamically or powerfully. All those things relate to the muscle's abilities to generate force, i.e. strength.
Sure.
Right? So you watch a kid run, they're developing high amounts of force. You watch a kid play football, they're having to find high amounts of force. Rugby scrums, for example, young kids going head to head against each other. Skiing, right? Tremendously high forces.
Even without the barbell.
Yeah. So, go into the weight room, we actually can't reproduce the same forces in the weight room that you experience actually doing the sport. We're just surrogates of it. And so to think that weight training is going to stunt growth, damage plates. No, the sport and activities themselves are more likely to do that as the amount of forces. And again, there's a lot of unique situations as to why Osgood slatters, the disease related to, growth plates being slightly damaged and whatnot, why those things come on. I've worked with a lot of young people who have gone through that. And of course, once they are diagnosed with it, of course, then you modify the programs they're on. But so should the sport as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Often the missing picture here is that people still just go out and do the sport in the same way. You've got to modulate that. It's any physical stress, right? So to say that kids shouldn't weight train, what are we talking about when weight training? Is a push-up not a weight training exercise? It's strength training,
right?
And yet most kids lifting their own body weight is actually heavier than they would lift if they put dumbbells in their hands.
Right.
So the argument just falls down on so many levels, let alone the abundance of research that's out there. US research at Avery Feigenbaum pushes a lot of this. Right. So much evidence out there how beneficial it is for kids, even with our, dietary situation these days for helping with diabetes and future osteoporosis and weight loss and, mental health, physical abilities, and also performance in classrooms. There's just such a weight of evidence that it's something that I do find myself having to still justify all the time, but I wish I didn't have to do that anymore.
To parents or to athletes or?
Parents, athletes, and coaches. There's still sports coaches who have their athletes, playing leapfrog, jumping, running sprints, and they think that's safe. And then they think weight training isn't safe.
Right. It's just some dogma that they adopted subconsciously.
Yeah, absolutely. And the medical profession as well has often pushed that. You've got to wait till you're 16. What magic spell comes down on any young person the moment the clock strikes 12 and they're now 16? That changes everything.
Yeah, which can be said of any sort of physiological change at any age, right? You always hear, and I know some of it's just because people are trying to spread ideas and they're trying to do it in a pragmatic way, so they do choose ages that do have some relevance. But it's like you always hear this with men and testosterone, for example. It's like, when you turn 30 years old, you'll all of a sudden start losing 1% a year. And okay, maybe their average is that way, but it's not like you wake up when you're 30 and you're any different than you were at 29, 364
I don't know.
days.
I think there is a magic 30 switch.
Or 45 or 60 or whatever. None of these things, they're all lines and curves, and they're all individual too, right?
There's a lot of bandwidths with any of those heuristics, rule of thumb, right? And where you kind of sit on that continuum is something which only you will know yourself. Yes, we have biological changes with age, we have biological changes with training, we have biological changes with stress, we have biological changes with lack of sleep, with what we eat. All these things again interrelate into a system that
divorce, whatever.
Absolutely.
They can all be major stressful events like that can totally disrupt your endocrine system, and I think it's fascinating to kind of look into the science on all of that too, because you would have more knowledge and experience and sort of perspective on this. But I imagine, and it just kind of dovetails into my next question, like so much has changed about what we know scientifically about sports now and the way that we kind of even analyze those things. It's like 40, 50 years ago, we just didn't know very much. I mean, I wouldn't say very much, but we knew a lot less about the scientific mechanisms of things. And so coaches and doctors and physicians, they would certainly identify patterns, but it was harder to know like what's the actual variable here.
Well, it goes down to granulation, or what granularity of understanding do you need? I would argue that a lot of coaches for a long time knew a lot because day in, day out, that was the trade that they were working in. And so they would observe trends and patterns in athletes. They'd identify certain characteristics. They might mailbox or bucket athletes in certain ways. And over years of experience, they kind of start seeing trends and patterns. So they draw conclusions from that, and that can help guide their future decision making. Then we have this world of so much information rich, but knowledge poor. Because we have so much information, we don't really know what level of granularity we need to help us make better decisions.
Sure.
And that even goes back to the weight training question, right? Like, these younger athletes can have so many different coaches all year round because they play a number of different sports, or seasonal coaches, all with different opinions on what you should eat or how you should train, and should you do weight training or not. It's very confusing for them, let alone for the parents who are trying to manage and navigate a pathway through all this too. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to help people out with.
Is to offer consistency essentially to these athletes, or
sounding board consistency. Like, I've been doing this for over 30 years, working with young athletes in a range of different sports. And, myself, I've seen some big rocks that emerge as, influencing factors around their performance and their health. Their health being both physical health from an injury perspective, but also mental health too. And three of those really big factors, big rocks, are, do they actually train well? Do they understand how to manage training? And I mean manage all the inputs that are hitting their body. Look, at 15, 16 years of age, when I got mono, I was playing for 14 different soccer teams, 2 years above my own age group as well. That wasn't good workload management. All right?
It's too much, you're saying?
Way too much, yeah. On my body. So these young players or athletes in different sports, again, they could be doing football, then they've got baseball, then they're doing basketball, or actually they're stuck in one sport, but because then they're with club, then they're with school, and that gets revolved around. So they get conflicting messages. And what I've found, people have found me very useful for, is just having that, I don't want to say voice of reason, but someone who has worked internationally at this across a lot of different sports. I have two boys myself, been through it myself. I'm a parent, and I work with a lot of other parents. Is that you got someone who can give you a very good sounding board. I'm not going to necessarily say what you should or shouldn't do, but someone who can talk you through those things through experience, but also the experience I can tap into because of literally the hundreds of young people I've worked with.
Yeah, what you said there is exactly the point I was trying to make about the analogy to the music producer. It's exactly that. It's like you, Nick Ward, with this experience and the variety of sports you've coached, you have the ability to zoom out on the athlete, on the human being, whereas kind of by definition, that particular athlete, whether they're a junior athlete or an adult who's just trying to get fit to ski more comfortably in Tahoe, the principle's the same, that we're all so myopic in our own little worlds. It's very difficult, and that's where somebody like you can come in and really facilitate the progress. And I can speak to that firsthand, having worked with you last year. One of the things I found really interesting about working with you certainly was this all-encompassing approach, this kind of general approach to how the sport, the demands of the sport interact with whatever's going on maybe in your, personal life and your athletic life, and how nutrition and sleep and everything kind of work together as a system, right? But I remember a phone call I had with you, I think it was early season in Colorado, and you had actually kind of challenged me to approach my on-snow training from sort of an artistic perspective, which I think probably is a very useful paradigm for anybody, but I think for me particularly, you were probably challenging me because that my primary career is as an artist. So it's it was a really helpful way of me being able to take kind of the more solid, objective elements of the workout, meaning we're doing 4 sets of whatever this is, right? The mathematical side, and approaching it from a more creative side. And anyway, I found that to be really helpful.
And I try to find authenticity in the people I train with or I work with, and if you can tap into that authenticity, and it really helps the sort of the power dynamics between me coaching them and working with me. And I mean, it really also came through my work with Travis Ganong, right? When we started talking about when he was a soccer player, when he was younger, and how he liked the movement and the running. And so, you know, he wasn't necessarily someone who was going to find massive affinity to lifting heavy weights around, all right? Although he got very, very strong and he could. Yeah. But he liked the idea of rhythm and fluidity. So he brought that into the training world. You know, he didn't want to just smash stuff out. Yeah. Now, someone else who that was their authentic self.
Like they grew up doing CrossFit or something, whatever.
That might work
for
them.
You might lean into that more.
Yeah, that, exactly. So I'm not about, it's not my way. I try to find that kind of, what are those unique individual attributes? You know, what's unique about this person that works for them? And more you can align around that uniqueness, that authenticity, I think, you know, the training, the eating, the recovery, the stuff I'm trying to help these people learn, be aware of, you know, find strategies for, manage, just has a better chance of success. Sure. Simple example. I'm working with one young athlete in South Lake Tahoe the other day, and we're doing some nutrition profiling. And it's like, well, I see you know that broccoli is really healthy for you and good for you as an athlete, but you don't like it. Yeah, I know I should eat more of it. I'm like, no, you don't like it. Let's not worry about broccoli. Show me something that you do like that you know is good for your health, your energy, your body composition, you as an athlete. Oh, carrots. Okay. How do we get more carrots into your diet then? So it's just shifting the argument away from, you know, banging your head against the wall to try and make them do something they don't like, to nudging things in different areas.
Yeah, I've heard that sort of philosophy expressed in regards to academics, which I think is also great. At some point, you need to obviously have a broad range of skills, but especially as you get into like higher education, it's like, no, you should specialize in the stuff that you actually like by the time you get to that point. It's like, like you're talking about nutrition. It's like, well, broccoli isn't the only healthy food on the planet. So if you don't like it, let's find another way to approach this.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's an hourglass effect, right? You know that you think, you know, oh, I'm specializing is really going to narrow me down. But then it just opens up again to many different choices and options and variables and ways of connecting things together.
Man, when you think about physical training, for example, is the example that's kind of relevant to this conversation, it's like there's just so many different ways you can approach it, right? And so another advantage of having a coach like you with your experience set is to be able to kind of make sense of that, because as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, or a parent of one of these athletes, how do they know? And so that I was going to ask you, when you start working with, let's say, a junior athlete, ski racer, could be any sport, but so how are you assessing their level when they're entering your sphere? And I guess, how are you assessing that so that you can put together a program that makes the most sense?
So we do a deep dive on history. You know, what's their background? Do they have any kind of numbers, performance level results, you know, training histories? And that's going to vary depending on their age and their kind of experience as well. I also try to do a little bit dive into family background and, you know, different genetic traits that might be there and whatnot too. And then we say, okay, you know, what's the vision? And maybe the vision is that, you know, I just want my daughter or son to enjoy skiing and have a healthy life doing it so we can get out doing this. Maybe it is we want to get a college scholarship. Maybe they're going to make the Olympic Games. The goal is to look at 3 key areas: how well they can train, how well they manage their eating. That's key to me as well, and also the rest and recovery. So I kind of analyze all those 3 areas. It takes 2 or 3 weeks to get a kind of a rough idea of what they're like with all that stuff. Movement in particular, how do they move in their sport? What are their coaches saying about any, you know, movement issues or technical issues or underperformance levels? And then recognizing really, you know, if you're going to tie physical to the sport, you're looking at a number of things. You're looking at the skill required to compete at that level in that sport, what technical abilities underpin those skills, and then what physical abilities underpin those technical abilities, and then what general athletic capacities underpin that. And then even more so for the younger athletes, what potential have we still left untapped here? Now, they all present to me as a snapshot in time. There's everything that's gone before, and there's going to be everything that's yet to come. And one thing that I'm able to do, because I've worked with athletes in skiing now across the spectrum, so you know, from junior up to Olympic level, I've got an idea of what that pathway somewhat looks like.
Yeah.
You know, so
and what the range of potential is.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You know, and there's still more for me to do in that area, 100%. So from that initial assessment, then I get asked a lot of questions by parents, and they dive into minutiae straight away. You know, well, what about B12? And I'm like, let's just look at if we're doing things generally well right now. Let's look at the big rocks, right? So how are we on energy levels, for example? You know, is body composition something we got to talk about? You know, how's your overall health? And most of the time with younger athletes, it's energy is the biggest thing with them, right? It oscillates so much through the day, either through under eating or overeating, or just having certain foods at certain times of the day that makes them drowsy or sleepy. Energy management. But of course, that doesn't sit alone. We spoke about interrelated factors. How's their sleep? Sleep quality, sleep quantity. Stress levels coming out of COVID and stuff as well. Kids with school is different. Their ability to be more independent has changed. That's different. So there's an example of two things that are going to overlap in terms of energy. And then physically, what are you doing all week? Well, I'm doing 4 hours of football. I'm then going to the gym twice a week, you know, as part of my course. And then I'm going to do baseball practice. Then I'm going to go for a 5-mile run because my track coach wants me to keep running 3 times a week.
And I'm going to get grounded if I don't have a 4.0.
If I don't have I've got my school homework to get done as well. And it's like, whoa, and if everyone is going to the cow with a pail and a bucket to milk the cow. And that's what I challenge with all the time. Everyone is going to milk the cow. And the cow can't handle all that, right? The young child can't handle all those people, you know, trying to take. No one is looking to give. No one is looking to manage, you know, all these drains on their resources. And somehow some of them muddle through and make it, you know. But whether they make it as a professional or... and many don't. Of course, most don't. One of the key underpinning things for me is if we don't help them become high-performing athletes, the skills they'll learn through what we do, they'll have a greater chance of being high-performing people.
Which, at the end of the day, regardless of whether or not they become a professional athlete, is actually really important, right? Maybe the most important thing.
Well, look what's come out of me training you, right? We've become friends.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's lifelong, right? That's way more important than, you know, you getting back on the team. And I mean, you might not have thought it was at the time.
Man, well, I mean, even just reflecting on that experience and, you know, the friendship that we've cultivated and everything that I've learned and how working with you is definitely also... inspired deeper curiosity for me in various ways. I remember one thing that you really impressed upon me initially when we were working together was mobility. And it's like the fact that was kind of a blind spot for me. I don't mean completely a blind spot, but now seems ridiculous that I could have missed how important that is, right? But if you can't move in all sorts of different planes, especially in a sport like ski racing, but any sport really, they're all complicated. You can't even access certain strength, or you can't even really define coordination, because what is coordination if you can't get into those positions?
But we also, what I like to talk about is how the body will find the most efficient way for you to move. So efficiency is, you know, think of it as, you know, what's the kind of, what are we wasting, what are we using, right? I'm 80% efficient, 20% efficient, whatever. But the body's only going to make you move based on the resources it believes itself to have available. So part of training is making more resources available. So while the body is being efficient, it's not being as efficient as it could be. It's been as effective as it can be with the resources it believes it has available to it.
With the current limitations.
Right? Now, with older athletes, sorry, Eric, you have to make some considerations on what are we going to change. With younger athletes, generally they're very malleable still, right? There's still a lot of different ways they can go, you know? So you've still got a little bit more to work with. So it's almost like having that block of marble where, you know, with the younger athlete, I can probably knock a few chunks off and everything's going to be okay. With the older athletes, you can't go knocking chunks off. You got to go in with a scalpel and be a little bit more considerate, you know, of what you're going to change. But, you know, knowing that, you know, the discipline that you were skiing for and you're working for, and then also looking at your movements, and sometimes you've got a little bit of backache and these kind of things, like, all right, well, these things kind of interrelate, and the body works as a system.
Right.
If we can get a little bit more mobility going for you, this may help your resources last for longer.
Sure.
So you can be more effective for longer.
Sure.
And therefore, maybe then your brain starts to realize you have other resources available. It starts looking at other ways to make you more efficient.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It starts improving your technique. Your techniques become more efficient. They don't die halfway into a turn. You've got to go into backside movements, right, to get round or whatnot too. Or you start getting tired exiting late, so you're not ready for the next gate or whatever, right? So the part of it is again is the whole system of how we learn, basically where we started from, right? Is understanding what it takes for someone to learn.
Sure. Yeah, in ski racing in particular, I know that you really focus a lot on hip mobility. And it's just absolutely critical in ski racing because every phase of the turn is dynamic. It's very rare. I mean, occasionally for maybe a part of a downhill turn, you might be kind of locked into a strong position. But with that being the only exception, pretty much every part of every event of ski racing is always a series of small little movements that extend and retract and rotate and all of this. And your hips are foundational to all of that. And I remember thinking, having a little bit of an aha moment, being like, well, wait a second. I'm coaching younger athletes, and I'm trying myself to get into these ridiculously contorted positions. And I haven't even really thought about, can my body actually do that?
Yeah.
And anyway, it's a blind spot and one that you certainly helped me kind of see. You mentioned Travis Ganong earlier, and for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, Travis Ganong is at this point a former World Cup ski racer. I think 2-time Olympian. He's won World Cups. He was on the podium last year at Kitzbühel, which was his final year. In a year, you coached him, and I actually had him on the podcast a few months before that. So that was exciting. But so you worked with Travis for a number of years, as well as his fiancee Marie-Michelle Gagnon, both World Cup ski racers. And just to kind of dive into that world a little bit, I'm wondering, over the course of time you worked with Travis and Marie, and this is 4 years, 5 years?
5.5 years, 6 years, yeah.
Okay. A couple questions. One, are there any specific observations of things that you learned that maybe you wouldn't have expected learning? And also just maybe any particularly notable or cool stories that people might find interesting about working with these like World Cup level skiers?
Yeah, I mean, Marie-Michelle Gagnon was sort of from the Canadian system. She was very into the sports science and open to that, and worked with a colleague of mine, Matt Jordan. And
is that how you guys got connected through Marie-Michelle?
Yeah, through Matt. Yeah, through Matt and
okay.
Marie-Michelle, because she was here, and Matt knew I was here with ALTIS at the time, working at Barton Performance across the road there. And then after, I guess Travis, seeing how I was working Marie, she must have persuaded Travis to say, hey, you might get on with this guy. Why don't you try him? Because I understand, there was, the US team had their thing going on, and maybe it didn't always resonate with what Travis thought or how he wanted to do stuff. So, early days, built the relationship, and, recognizing that Travis was very different to Marie. Marie was very detail oriented. Travis in this sort of training wasn't so detail oriented, and I'm training them both at the same time. And so COVID was even more interesting, because all of a sudden I didn't have my technology available to me. I didn't have the same training space available to me. Very interesting how many toys had to leave the room.
So you had to adapt.
I had to adapt massively, and to train them both together more, and getting Travis to really buy into the warm-up, the mobility, the benefit, the regeneration work, how much better his body was going to feel by doing all this stuff,
Like maybe you shouldn't go for a 13-mile mountain bike ride if
maybe
you need to.
Shouldn't. That's right. Yeah, and so they started, we started working on all that, and Marie was a big advert on one side to promote some of my thinking to Travis. Likewise, Travis was a big advert to Marie to not maybe be so detail oriented.
Cool.
Sometimes it's okay to back off a little bit and maybe adapt the program.
Sounds like a good marriage in the making.
Yeah. So, but I'd say that I learned so much by being with those two. That's probably what I'm most grateful for. is being around, two fantastic athletes, two fantastic skiers, watching how they adapt through the seasons, understanding the sport a lot more at that level, being able to go out at different times to shadow and watch and listen to their coaches, and then, in some cases work with their coaches on flaws. Travis's was his start. He got way better at starting, to be one of the best starters in his last year or two. Those things with Marie and their coach. So again, it showed that interconnection of how technique in the sport can be supported by an appropriate melody of exercise selections that try to help manage that problem that's been identified by a coach.
Yeah. And each athlete is their own problem or challenge, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so when you're setting up, it's not necessarily going to be the same thing.
No.
And
one real simple example is let's just take a squat with a band around your back, right?
Sure.
You're lifting heavy weight, you got a band, so it applies resistance in a slightly different way, right? Now with Travis, the reason I'd use the band with him for is that I didn't want him to really load his back up at the bottom part of a squat movement, right? So the band put more resistance onto him as he came through the squat movement, so he could be very healthy in doing good squat mechanics.
But still achieve the same load, or
not by the numbers written on the bar.
Yeah.
So we've got to get our head around some. The brain doesn't know what numbers on the bar. All it knows is the intensity of the task you're asking it to do. All right. But Travis ended up having one of the highest body weight to squat ratios in the squad. All right.
Really?
And we never lifted to maximum.
Okay.
The whole time. All right.
Meaning you were never doing like a 1 rep max?
No, never did failure.
Okay.
Even a 3 rep max was never a failure.
Okay.
It was always I've got 1 or 2 left in the tank.
And the philosophy there was
keep them healthy.
Okay.
Remember, older athlete, some knee situations, keep them healthy. We don't really know exactly what squat weight correlates to good ski performance.
Yeah, right.
We don't have that level of precision.
How would you ever do a randomized control trial?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what makes him feel good? He's pushing good weight, and when Per Lundstam come on, he was really helpful with the US ski team.
Who's that?
Per Lundstam come on as like the head of sort of performance, S&C and stuff.
Okay.
He was there 10 years ago apparently. He went with Red Bull for a while, came back to be involved, Scandinavian guy. So he was really useful and helpful for me in the sort of targets we're trying to set for Travis and things too. But on the same regard, the same exercise, exactly the same exercise for Marie, because she was moving from tech skiing to speed skiing, I would say she was very twitchy, all right, and how she would ski. She needed to be on the ground for longer to generate force for longer.
You mean she was just kind of used to making really sort of quick movements?
Yes, Okay. So, how could I help that in the weight room was, by even when she was doing a power clean, keeping her feet on the floor. When she's doing these squats again with the band, it helped her feel like she was pushing and generating force for longer. So it gave the same kind of feel to what we were looking for her to do on skis. That's how I rationalized it. That's how we discussed it. And so, we would agree plans. That was the biggest thing, is the ability to agree what the goals were, what we were working towards.
Sure. So speaking of, I know Travis had a couple injuries, a back injury and an ACL. Were those the two major ones? Or
and we had some on both knees as well. I had some cartilage deficit on the backside of one knee as well. Sure. So to a certain extent, I had to train both his legs differently at times as well, because I couldn't get away with the same patterns or movements in both legs.
Was that directly post-injury, or was it just kind of residual, like never quite got exactly the same sort of healing back?
Probably ask him more than me. I just knew what I was dealing with and the questions he would have. And as we start looking at when he would report back and I'm feeling really tight here, you've got anything for this, you start mapping those patterns. So you do your trend and pattern analysis. And, most of the time, actually, it was his non-ACL leg that was the one that was bothering him more.
Isn't that fascinating?
Maybe because he's loading it more. So we had strategies that Angie Hagenar helped me a lot. Physical therapy assistant, one of the best therapists around, works with me at PT Revolution.
Yeah, I met Angie last year.
She gave me a lot of help with ideas around that, but also things for him to go away and self-manage, and that's part of it, right? The difference between working with mountain athletes and young skiers and Olympic skiers is that they're often their own team. as you know. All right. Unlike when I worked in professional sports clubs,
rugby,
the teams
whatever.
with them, they're with them around them every single day. So that was the big change for me working in the winter mountain sports, especially skiing, was how independent they need to be and how you have to start building a team around them to help them with all these potential eventualities.
Sure. Did you sense or actually get any resistance from, we don't even have to speak specifically about their coaches. I'm just wondering when you fall into that role where you're sort of assisting, whether it's a junior athlete and maybe their ski coaches, their technical ski coaches are at Palisades, or whether it's working with an athlete like Travis who has a U.S. ski team coach. Do you often get resistance from those people, or are they happy to see you and say, oh, I'm really glad you're handling this side. I'm going to teach them how to cross block. You're going to handle the conditioning side of things.
It varies, and it's still something I think I need to do a lot better at is get out and see the coaches more, and that's part of what I do with my programs is reach out and call and talk. Now, I would say, though, it ends up being on me to go to them, not them come to me. So eventually, once they realize that I'm not just a strength guy, I've been in the game a long time. I'm open to discussion and talking through things, and I now know a little bit about the sport. That they become better conversations. But resistance is there from most head coaches in a lot of sports that I've worked with until you forge that trust. And part of that is also, from a younger athlete's point of view, the discussions the parents are willing to have and actually support this program they're trying to put around their own child as well, and that they're also managing sometimes the conflicts that do arise. In really, most of the time, it comes down to workload management. How much is being asked of their young child and in what way? Often I'm filling the gaps sometimes as well. Like they've got all these different programs being thrown at them, and often they have no choice. They have to go and do it. And I really believe in choice. So we learn how to modulate, modify, adapt, and then we look at what's missing. And that might be on the nutrition side. It might be on the recovery side. But, we try and manage that through the best that we can.
Yeah. So in regards to injuries, any particular advice you have to athletes of any age, I suppose, as far as like things they can do to mitigate injury risk, and also how are you thinking about that when you're putting together a program? And I know that obviously a lot of this is going to overlap with just putting together a sensible program anyway, but if we can kind of focus on how it pertains to injury prevention, that'd be great.
The striking figure to me is that over 63% of young skiers under the age of 21, I think, by the time they're 21, have had a career-threatening injury.
60%?
Yes. There you go.
Yeah. 16.
Yeah. I mean, even AJ Hurt has done brilliantly recently, right? She had a bad injury a couple of years ago. She got on her first podium. So it's crazy. Those numbers are absolutely crazy.
It's like a rite of passage.
But it shouldn't be, right? I mean,
fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's just accepted. All right? And then the re-injury rates are astronomical as well. How many people re-injure themselves afterwards? You can put your hand up again. All right? Yeah. Both hands up.
Only one
Yeah. Yes.
No. So actually, I don't know if this is what you mean by re-injury, though, because I've equally done both ACLs now. I haven't ever re-injured one of them specifically.
Still a re-injury. Still related.
Okay.
Because, there's a whole lot we can go into.
Sure.
Matt Jordan,
It's a system, right?
Matt Jordan in Calgary is the expert at all that, and I learn a lot from him.
Nice.
So, where were we going with this one again?
I was asking about parametry.
There's there's more drivers there, but we kind of break them down, and Coach Dan Paff, one of my head mentors at ALTIS, 5 key drivers.
Okay.
No, the 3 we've already mentioned. Training well. So how well are you managing your workload? Do you have good quality mechanics and movement? All right. And then looking at volume and intensities of physical training to support the technical training in sports. So your potential, your capacities, your abilities, your technique, your skill. Okay. So that's we got to look at that. So any program where you're overdoing workload based on the mechanics that you have has a greater risk of injury. All right. There is not one. By the way, there is not one piece of scientific evidence that says any movement screen can predict injury.
Okay.
Right? There's no one has come out yet with a fail-safe way to predict injury. All we know is there are factors involved, and we have to work to manage these factors.
Can we drill down on what you just mentioned, though, for some clarification for me and maybe those who are listening? Are you saying that if the movement pattern is not happening in an optimal way, you're increasing injury risk because of a poor movement, or what's
yes, because we start to have energy leaks. We start to outstrip the resources available for us for the movement that we're good at. So the body, if you're still demanding the body to move going down a hill, it's got to move. Right?
It's going to find a way to do it.
It's going to find a way to do it.
Might not be good.
Correct. So two things happen: you do it poorly, and you get to the bottom of the hill, or you do it poorly and you don't get into the bottom of the hill. All right, it's one or the other. And, but then choosing the poor movement pattern over time starts to get ingrained. So that also becomes a preference. So it starts building efficiencies that way, starts to find a way to be effective in another way of doing it. So, let's take structural integrity as a kind of engineering term. Any engineers out there might blast me if I get this wrong. But, let's just take the Golden Gate Bridge. Is it built to withstand the traffic that goes over it and the weather that it comes across, right? So you look at the whole thing as an entire structure like that. But then you got tolerances down to the individual nuts and bolts, cables and stuff like that, right? They're the little tolerances that we're also looking at in the human body too. So if any of those tolerances are outstripped, overstressed, then it can, lead to something snapping or going bang, or just underperformance. That's one thing as well. Underperformance is something we've got to look at more. So training well is a key block. Workload management, again, athletes doing lots of different sports, lots of different coaches, all throwing all this stuff at them. One day they're doing sprinting and jumps here. They go to their volleyball coach. They're doing more jumps on that day. And then they go to their S&C coach. They're doing more jumps. It's not coordinated, right? The workload isn't managed. Then we talk about the eating well. Again, the fuel, the energy, the reserves, what fuel does also for our recovery, our regeneration. So the eating well is another big driver of performance and health, injury. We also know that there's certain things in our diet that can help recover from injuries as well. Then we've got the rest recovery side. Are we taking appropriate rest? Where do we schedule rest? How do we identify whether parts of our body are not moving optimally? Can we get them moving better again? Maybe we do on one day, but not on another. There's factors like that too. But then there's other things. Equipment. Get the right equipment. Spend time getting the boot fit. If you get a chance to try skis out, get the right equipment. The amount of times you can rock up, whether it be with a golfer I'm working with or a skier I'm working with, and say, oh, you got new boots. When did you get those? The golfer's got new shoes. When did you get those? Yesterday. Okay, great. Have you tried them out yet? Nope. Or the golfer gets a new set of clubs they've never used before. Interaction with the equipment, your physical abilities, and the slope, all right, the constraints-led model, all right, all that has to end up in harmony.
It's a system still.
A system.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And through experimentation, trial and error, getting the data, looking at trends and patterns, we harmonize that. So back to your music analogy, if you went to an orchestra and listened to listen to a symphony being played, and you asked every instrument to play by themselves, first of all, you'd have no idea what that piece of music was. You hear that everyone play together, you know what the piece of music is. But it didn't start out that way, did it? It started out things being a little bit off time, someone coming at the wrong time, someone overemphasizing, and that's what the composer, the conductor, the producer, as you mentioned earlier, is there to help do, is to bring it into harmony.
Sure.
And that's really, I guess, is probably the best way to use an analogy is what I try to do. I want everything to come into harmony.
Yeah, I love it. It actually just made me think a little bit when you were explaining that about, it's not exactly the same thing, but the components of a car, for example, any one component does not actually constitute a car. It's actually worthless on its own, whether it's just a nut or a bolt or a steering wheel. What are you going to do with that unless it's connected to the other?
And I could have said 2 years ago, the car has no purpose because it needs a person to drive it, a human being to drive it, right? And that's, again, the interaction of the human, the environment and the task that's at hand. The purpose is to drive, but not so much the case these days.
Well, we sure live in interesting times, that's for sure. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, we were discussing just a little bit before we started recording, just the kind of broadly speaking, the very tense, complicated social political environment we live in. And we're not going to get into that in particular detail, other than my question for you is, as a coach, as somebody who's working with athletes of all sorts of different ages and abilities and probably political backgrounds and all sorts of different variables, I mean, I know that you're, just through our friendship, I know that you're a curious person who's thinking about all sorts of things in the world, but is that something that factors into the way you're coaching ever, as far as just like, I don't know, I don't want to sound corny, but some sort of element of like community building? I know you mentioned like really trying to develop people that are good human beings, but I guess this question is a little more open-ended. I'm just wondering how you're kind of thinking about that at large, and in what ways it might intersect with your coaching role. Or you mentioned before being a performance coach, which isn't necessarily as specific as just a strength and conditioning coach, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of playing with, personal athlete lifestyle coach or something like that, right? Because, I do try to take things to the personal level. Yes, most of these people are trying to be athletic in the pursuit of their sports, but as a system, we know that lifestyle influences a lot of this as well. So from a community point of view, I hope that my website that I'm constructing, the newsletter, we start to share a lot of good information. So we start having useful conversations. So that's important to me, that we create a community of human beings that are prepared to ask questions, be challenged, lean into support, and that we can, try and make some sense of, let alone all the information that's getting thrown at us through news and media around everything else that's going on in the world. It's crazy just in our area. What you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, what you should train as, what you shouldn't train as. Oh, this is better than this. It's crazy, So I invite people to be curious, and let's set up an experiment. Okay, you think this is going to be good for your energy levels. Let's try it for 2 weeks. How do we affect and measure that? So to some certain extent, I bring people back to a little bit of a scientific method to actually get them to test out their thoughts and theories. So part of what I do with the community I work with is like, oh, that's interesting. How is that working for you? I don't dismiss it. I'm curious about it. And then we try to find out, can they, kind of like Simon Sinek's, can they get to the 5 whys as to why they should be doing X rather than Y. So then we get to explore problems and hypotheses in a bit more of a joined up way, and try to get people to share that through the community as well. So for example, when I was working with England Golf, we ended up having a lot of the girls in one of the regional golf teams, they produced their own cookbook that they shared with everybody. Here's things that we have all found useful as golfers walking around the golf course, or being as part of our food for training. Great way to share community. So really good ideas start off, grow and produce great outcomes. I think when you stay open-minded to it and kind of at least provide some guide rails and guidelines to see whether allow the thought processes to grow, but it ends up producing a way better answer or than I could ever come up with by myself. So I believe in community because it makes me better too, not just making the athletes better. Yeah,
that's so important. And just like you're saying, as it pertains to an athlete, there are all of these various functions that have to work together as a system, and when you kind of zoom out more than that, we're all functioning in some sort of a system that hopefully works and is synergistic. And
well, the community here, I mean, I work at PT Revolution now in South Lake Tahoe. What a fantastic community to be engaged with all the mountain athletes, recreational folk that come and hang out there and train there. But I've got a brilliant team of physical therapists right there for me all the time, and other people that I can tap into. And it just, it does create that kind of, again, that holistic, for want of a better word, one-stop shop for stuff that people might need. And I hope to bring training camps for different athletes from different parts of the country and stuff too here across the summer, and come and enjoy this kind of generalist, holistic approach. But not just the athlete. I want their parents to come, bring their coaches, and again, keep forging that kind of community approach to, like I say, whether they become high performance athletes or we just help them be high performing people.
Sure. So maybe you can tell us a little more about that. I remember you telling me a little bit when we were hiking right up in these mountains behind your house.
Yep.
This is a project you kind of have in the works. Can you give us a little more information on that?
Yeah. So, people tell you what you should be doing sometimes when you're in business and you're trying to create a livelihood, and there definitely seems to be an ask for parents and younger athletes to have some kind of resource that they can trust, someone who's more of an all year round coach. And that's what I was described as, and not something I chose to describe myself as. You're here all year round, rather than in and out. So providing those guide rails, that sounding board, and a service to write training programs, but also to coach, educate, and mentor not just the young person, but their family and hopefully their coaches as well, on an all year round basis, not just seasonal. I'm doing, some people live local, so it's kind of more face to face. Some people are, like I got Evans in Canada and others in Montreal and one in England. So that's all virtual. But wouldn't it be great if at some point there's an event here, where everyone can come to? So we end up with this kind of hybrid approach. So I think through PT Revolution and the expertise I've got through ALTIS and the education resources that they provide me with, we have a way of bringing learning into one place with everyone that's involved in that system.
Yeah, but Lake Tahoe is such a shithole. Like, you want to find a nice place to do this somewhere.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, maybe we'll go somewhere else.
If the lake were just a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I know. It's a terrible place to have to come, right? There's nothing to do here. It's really boring. Yeah, I know.
Man. So basically, the concept is almost like a destination, athletic / social kind of camp where people can come develop athletic skills and cultivate friendships.
Yeah, as you can tell, I probably haven't really refined it as well yet, but that's what my community is going to help me with.
Sure.
By creating this community, newsletter, Q&As, talk to me, then I think we can really figure out what is it you really need. I've got my ideas from my experiences, and that's what I'm putting forward to start with. But that's moldable, that's malleable. We can adapt that by the community growing and really expressing what it is that they really need. But yeah, destination, again, personal, athlete, lifestyle camps.
Yeah, cool. I love it. Well, I won't have to come far from Reno.
No, you won't. I'll make sure you can't get across the border.
So who are some of your inspirations? And this is a broad question. This could be other coaches that sort of influenced you. It could be favorite athletes. It could be artists. It could be famous people. It could be your mother. I'm kind of curious, like, as far as really formative people that kind of developed Nick Ward into the human that he is.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I often think about who have been my key mentors in life, and I think there's been momentary mentors as well as people that have been around for a period of time. And certainly as a younger person growing up, my dad left home when I was 12, single parent family and all that stuff, 2 older brothers. And, first and foremost, I do look to my 2 brothers and my mum, as the strength that they gave me and looking at the decisions and things that they had to take in their lives, and also their mess ups, their cock ups. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to do that. Helps drive you in certain ways. And so they've always been there for me. My PE teacher, Roger Stroud, at Larkmead School in Abingdon back in England. Again, very, very strong ex-RAF physical training instructor, Royal Air Force that is. And he was very good at basically giving me a clip around the ear when I needed it. But it was often a verbal clip. It wasn't a physical clip. It was just a little, oi, Wardy, come here. Let's have a conversation. Because maybe I'd been an asshole to some kid. He knew I had the abilities to really help other people. And so he made sure he put me on the guide rails.
He was the producer in your life.
He was the producer in my life, right. At that age, he certainly was. And, various other, my tutor, Pat Ainsley, was again someone who I could have, strong personal conversations with to help guide me. And again, it was that power of mentoring, that power of having someone to guide me to stop me getting into the trouble that I probably could have got in a lot more when I was younger.
Sure.
And then various other coaches. Jeff Cook at Durham County Cricket Club was the coach who said, hey, if we don't make these young people into great cricketers, let's hope they leave here as great people. And that really stuck with me through that too. So they were kind of very early career mentors for sure. And then you start looking at other professions, right? You really start admiring the way, for example, even David Beckham came back. Everyone's probably heard his story after the Netflix documentary, right? How he managed his life. I admire Prince, David Bowie. You know,
what is actually? Maybe I'm embarrassed to know. I don't know what the David Beckham.
Well, he was an England soccer player. David Beckham.
Okay, yeah.
Where have you been? Where have you been?
I don't know, man.
Hey. Well,
I missed this. I'll have to give me something to watch. But
so he, he was vilified after England got knocked out of the World Cup after an incident in a soccer game where he got sent off, and basically.
Is this in recent history or is
this? So this was back in the early 2000s now. But he now owns a soccer club over here. His wife was a part of the Spice Girls. So no one liked him because of that. But how he. As a very famous person, kind of through integrity, I felt, worked his way back up in the world from being completely vilified for his actions. I respected that. Players that I've been around, we speak about Travis and Marie, but there's other players that I've been around that have been some of my biggest mentors that have helped me understand their sport, have helped give me a helping hand in working in their sports. So the athletes that you train are huge. Mark Aston, the head coach at Sheffield Eagles, the way, to be honest, it's the way I saw him change as a coach over 10 years working with him was amazing to see someone who, certainly had certain characteristics as a coach, being such a great person manager, people manager, and what he did. That was awesome to watch that. So, I was kind of like, I had a lens into the way other people did stuff a lot as well. And so that was always inspiring to me. One local person here, as a younger person to me, totally inspiring, was our great friend and local athlete, Kyle Schmain, who passed away through an avalanche in Japan. We're coming up to his 1-year anniversary at the end of January. And, that hit this community really, really hard. But he was a huge inspiration as a younger person to me, also an inspiration to my son. And, I'm wearing his hat right now, which says, ski pal, eat ramen, smile more. And he basically says, it ain't that serious. Kyle Schmain.
Words to live by.
And he was one who said, make memories. You don't know about what any small thing you're doing today to make a memory. You don't know what that's going to lead you later in life. So in my 50s, his words have been very inspirational to me as well.
I love it. I never met Kyle, but everybody speaks of him so fondly.
Yeah.
And I'm really sorry that I didn't. But, well, I really appreciate all your time today. Is there anything else you want any of the listeners to know about Nick Ward, things you're working on? Obviously, we discussed a lot of this, and I will put notes as far as where people can find this stuff. But where can they find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Well, very soon it should be www.coachnickward.com.
Okay.
I'm putting out some emails for people to start joining the community and sharing what I'm sharing. You can find me in person in town here at PT Revolution. I also do an international coach mentorship with ALTIS. Lots of great free resources on the ALTIS website as well. To download around training and thoughts around training and whatnot too. Here I am, South Lake Tahoe.
People can find you on Instagram and
Coach Nick Ward,
Facebook.
On Twitter and Instagram as well.
You have some really great dance routines on TikTok too, so make sure to follow Nick on TikTok.
So many of my clients threatened to video me one day as I am prancing around the gym.
Well, Nick, thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you here.
Thanks, Eric.
And we'll see you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Conversations for Convergence. If you'd like to support the show or any of my musical endeavors, the best way is by joining my Patreon at patreon.com/Eric Henry Anderson. Of course, sharing the episodes with friends and family and rating and reviewing the show wherever you listen to podcasts helps immensely. For all other things Eric Henry Anderson, be sure to sign up for my mailing list at erichenryanderson.com. That's Anderson ending in S-E-N. You can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Eric Henry Anderson, and on X at capital E, capital H, capital A, N, D, E, R, S, E, N Music. Thanks for listening.